Hey, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Way, and today we're talking about something that I've watched quietly derail more small businesses than almost any other single decision: hiring. Specifically, the one hiring mistake that shows up in almost every small business I have ever coached or studied or led alongside. The mistake that looks completely reasonable in the moment, that almost always feels justified, and that consistently produces the same expensive, culture damaging, exhausting outcome 6 months down the road. Well, I have recruited over 5,000 salespeople across my career. I've developed more than 100 managers and coached dozens of high level companies. And I've watched teams thrive and teams fracture. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the factor that most determines which direction a team goes is almost never the skill level of the people on it. It is whether these people share the values of the business that they are a part of and that they are building. And so that's what this episode is about: the most common, most costly, and most preventable thing that people make mistakes in small business. So let's get into it. Well, let's talk about the mistake. Well, here is the mistake, plain and simple. You hire for skill, you fire for values. That is the whole pattern. And if you have been leading a team for more than a year, I would be willing to bet you have lived it at least once. You brought someone on who was technically excellent. Their resume was strong. They nailed the interview. They had the experience, the credentials, the specific capabilities you needed for the role. And you were relieved to find them because hiring is hard and this person seemed like the answer. And then 6 months in, something started to feel off. Maybe they were doing the work, but not quite the way the team does it. Maybe their communication style was creating friction. Maybe they cut corners in small ways that you kept having to address. Maybe the energy in the room shifted when they walked in. And maybe your best people started quietly pulling back. And you told yourself it was a performance issue, a communication issue, a management issue. You coached them, you gave feedback, you adjusted around them because they were good at the job and replacing them felt costly. But the real issue was never their skill, it was their values. And you hired them without ever checking for that. Skills get people in the door, values determine what happens after they walk through it. In a large company with 50 or 100 employees, a values misaligned hire is a problem. In a small business with a team of 2 to 20, a values misaligned hire is a culture event. Because in a small team, every single person has an outsized impact on the energy, the standard, and the dynamic of the whole. There is nowhere to absorb the damage. The wrong person does not just underperform in their lane. They change the temperature of the entire room. And I have watched it happen to founders who had built genuinely great teams. One hire, 6 months, culture shifted. Best people started looking around. Standard quietly dropped. Not because of anything dramatic, just the slow accumulation of someone in the room who did not share the values that made the team what it was. That is the most expensive hiring in small business. And it is almost entirely preventable. So why do we keep making it? Well, before I tell you how to hire differently, I want to spend a few minutes on why this mistake is so common. Because it is not happening because founders are careless. It is happening for a very understandable reason that produces very expensive outcomes. The thing is that we often hire from urgency, not always intention. And the most common context for a bad hire is a founder who needed someone yesterday. The business is growing faster than the team can handle. A role has been empty for too long. The founder is doing 3 jobs and burning out. And so when a candidate comes along who can technically do the work, the bar for everything else drops significantly. The values conversation gets skipped or rushed because there is not time for it. And the relief of filling the seat overrides the rigor of filling it right. Urgency is the enemy of good hiring every time. And the cost of a wrong hire almost always exceeds the cost of leaving the seat empty for another few weeks. We assume skills imply values. And there is a quiet belief in most hiring processes that someone who is excellent at their craft must also be a good cultural fit. That competence and character travel together. And they just don't. A person can be extraordinarily skilled and completely misaligned with your values. And in a small team, their skill will not save you from the damage their misalignment causes. And we don't always know how to interview for values because most hiring conversations are structured around capability. Tell me about your experience. Walk me through a time you handled this type of situation. What are your strengths? These questions reveal skill. They rarely reveal values. And because most founders have never been explicitly taught how to surface values in an interview, they just skip it. Not deliberately, just by default. So we're going to fix that in a few minutes. Well, what does this whole misaligned values hiring actually cost us? Well, I want to spend a few minutes here on the real cost of a values misaligned hire because I think most founders dramatically underestimate it. They think about the financial cost of replacing someone. They do not fully account for everything, for everything else that gets charged to that invoice. And it can cost you your best people. And this is the one that hurts and is least visible until it's too late. Your team, your best team members, the ones with options, the ones who are there because they believe in what you are building and the standard that you hold. Those people are exquisitely sensitive to values misalignment in the team. They notice when someone in the room is cutting corners, when the standard is being quietly negotiated, when the culture is shifting in a direction they did not sign up for. And they don't always tell you, they just start looking. And then one day you get a resignation that blindsides you from someone you thought was solidly committed. And the real reason is that the culture they joined is not quite the culture that they have been working in lately. The wrong hire does not just cost you the seat they fill. It costs you the trust of every high performer around them. And it costs you your leadership energy. Managing a values misaligned team is one of the most draining leadership experiences there is because you are not just managing performance. You are managing around a fundamental mismatch. Every interaction requires more energy. Every feedback conversation circles back to the same issues. Every standard that you try to hold gets quietly eroded. And you find yourself spending a disproportionate amount of your leadership capacity on the one person who should be the least of your concerns. And that energy has a cost, not just to you, but to every other person on your team who needed your attention and got less of it because you were managing around the hire that should not have happened. And it really can cost you the dream. And this is the one I want you to sit with because the business you are building, the culture you're creating, the standard you are trying to hold, all of this is an expression of the dream. And every person that you bring into the team either builds that dream or dilutes it. A values misaligned hire does not just affect performance metrics. They affect the texture of what you are building, the feel of the room, the sense that this team is something worth being a part of. Protect the dream by protecting who you let into the team that is building it. Now let's really dive in how to hire differently. And this is really exciting for me, especially the leaders I work with, because here's how you change the process. And it's not a complete overhaul. There's 4 specific shifts that will fundamentally change the quality of who you bring into your team. Shift number 1 is define your values before you write the job posting. You cannot screen for what you have not defined. So before you post the role, write down the 3 or 4 non-negotiable values that every person on your team must embody. Not the aspirational ones, the actual ones. The values that show up in how your team handles a different client, how they treat each other when things are hard, what they do when no one is watching. And write them down specifically enough that you could describe what they look like in a behavior. Not just integrity, but we do what we say we will do every time, even when it's inconvenient. That level of being specific of what makes them usable in an interview. The second thing is interview for values explicitly, not incidentally. And here are 3 questions that I use consistently to surface values in an interview. They are not trick questions. They are honest questions that give the candidate the opportunity to show you who they are. Question 1 is tell me about a time that you disagreed with a decision your leader made. What did you do? This surfaces how someone handles authority, conflict, and whether they communicate directly or go around people. Number 2 is tell me about a team you love being a part of. What made it different? This tells you what kind of culture someone thrives in and whether it matches yours. And question 3 is what would your last team say your biggest weakness was? Watch how they answer this one. Not just what they say, but whether they can be honest and self-aware or whether they deflect and perform. Values live in the specifics of those stories. So listen for what they prioritize, what they glossed over, and what made their eyes light up and what made them careful. Shift number 3 is let the team meet them before you decide. In a small business, culture fit is a team decision as much as a leader decision. The team who will work alongside this person every day have excellent instincts about whether someone belongs in the room. Give them the chance to use those instincts. This does not mean that the team makes the final call, but a structured opportunity for 2 or 3 key members to interact with the final candidate, followed by a specific question to each of them. What would you want this person on the team? Would interview alone can really provide. And then shift 4 is slow down when you most want to rush. The moment you are tempted to skip the values check is the moment you need to do it. Or I guess if you're tempted to skip that is just a reinforcement, I should say, as to why it's so important. Because when the role has been open too long, and when you're drowning in the gap, when this candidate seems like the answer, and you just want the search to be over, that urgency is exactly when the most expensive mistake gets made. The right hire is worth waiting for, and the wrong hire dressed up as a fast solution will cost you far more time than the wait ever would. So I want to close with something that I've said before in a different context, and it applies here more directly than almost anywhere else. The culture that you build is only as strong as the values of the people building it with you. Every hire is a culture decision. Every person you bring into the team either reinforces the standard or quietly erodes it. And in a small business where every individual has a disproportionate impact on the whole, that decision carries more weight than most founders give it. So take the time, ask the questions, let your team weigh in, slow down when urgency is pushing you to rush, and hold the standard even when it means the seat stays empty a little longer. Because the dream you are building deserves a team that is building it with you, not just executing tasks for you. Actually building it with the same values, the same standard, and the same belief in what you are creating. That team is built one careful hire at a time. So if this episode was useful, share it with a business owner who is hiring right now. They need this more than you know. And an Apple Podcast review or Spotify review for a couple minutes would be very special and very greatly appreciated. So thank you in advance. Next episode, we're going to go to something I get asked about consistently in my coaching work, and we'll dive more into that on our next episode. Until then, dream bigger and lead better. We'll see you next time.